Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy
the interview.
Today we're honoured to be joined by the member for the South Eastern Metropolitan Region, David Limbrick. David, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about you, could you give us a little brief description of yourself just before we get into the questions?
Yeah, so I was elected to Parliament in 2018 for the Libertarian Party. Prior to that, I worked in lots of different industries, but my background is basically business intelligence. So I worked in the finance sector and consulting for many years, and also took a 2-year sabbatical working in Japan as a teacher, believe it or not. So there you go.
So you've got a pretty good knowledge in Japanese, I'd assume, or?
Yeah, I can speak Japanese okay, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we'll get straight into our questions for you, David. So my first question to you is, how was your high school and university life, and do you have any memorable moments?
So my high school was a bit odd because I spent 3 years at a public school and then 3 years at Cranbourne High School, which is now Cranbourne Secondary, and then 3 years at St Francis Xavier in Beaconsfield.
Oh, okay.
And memorable moments. I got in trouble once when I got I got caught smoking cigarettes at high school and got suspended and got in a lot of trouble. So that was memorable.
How old were you at that stage?
I think I was in year 11 at that point. Yeah. So I don't smoke anymore though, so that's a good thing. So, and I don't recommend it to anyone watching. It's bad habit. Costs a lot of money and makes you sick. So don't do it. But
that's true. Yeah. And what about with university as well? Do you have any memorable moments for there, or what did you actually study at university?
Yeah, so I went to university twice. I went to Swinburne at first doing physics, and I dropped out of that in second year due to personal reasons, and then eventually went to Federation Uni, which was called Ballarat Uni at the time, and studied computer science and physics at university, and ended up graduating with a Bachelor of Computing. So yeah, that's my background in education. Yeah, and look, memorable moments. You know, I think just passing university was a big deal. It's a lot of work, especially since I'd already sort of, wasted 2 years, I suppose, and put in a lot of work to try and pass at Ballarat Uni. And yeah, it was pretty hard. Like, I didn't have a lot of money at the time, and had to live in a pretty bad share house and eat from discount food stores and stuff, all that sort of stuff that you do it as a uni student.
Yeah,
but,
just the grind to survive, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, like, I did get a part-time job eventually and worked this was like sort of during the mid-90s when the internet was starting up, and my first sort of job there was I was working with a small internet startup, so yeah.
Yeah, and so when you went to university in Federation, was that just straight after leaving Swinburne, or was there a bit of time?
There was about 6 months or so where I was sort of unemployed, and then decided I didn't want to be unemployed and went back to uni. So yeah.
And I think that's a good way to show for our audience out there that, even if you don't know exactly what you want to do or you drop out of university course, there's always great pathways and great opportunities there for you in the future, and to do different things, and moving unis, and in your case doing a similar course, but in some other cases doing a different course in a different university. Yeah. We'll move on now to our second question. I think that's with you, Tobias.
Yes.
Can you talk about your careers prior to politics and how it has prepared you to become a politician?
Well, I'm not sure how it's prepared me to become a politician, but I started, like I said, while I was at university, started working at an internet startup. One of the things that I studied at university was network engineering. I soon decided that I didn't really want to do network engineering, and but I did like database design and that sort of thing. So ended up moving into what they call business intelligence and data warehousing. And my first job after I finished uni was with a company, a small consulting company, doing that sort of consulting for different companies. So that was great. I got to work in lots of different industries and saw, mining industry and retail industry and all these different industries, and ended up landing in a senior management job in the finance industry. So I worked in there for a long time. And I suppose, look, if it relates to politics, I think just having experience of seeing different industries close up firsthand and how they operate. Actually, a lot of MPs don't really have that experience. A lot of MPs sort of just go through the political system and don't really experience that. So I think it's helpful for understanding constituents' concerns and understanding economics, I suppose, in how things actually work in the real world.
And I think Tobias can speak a bit on that as well, because I know you're doing a sort of IT sort of background.
Yeah.
If you could talk a bit.
Yeah, I'm doing a diploma in information technology with cybersecurity. So like we're currently doing networks and all that.
So how do you find networks so far, Tobias?
Not the greatest.
Yeah. Look, I think my biggest problem with networking was like it's really interesting, like doing networking stuff, but people only go to the network guys when things are broken. So, that's what I found. No one appreciates it when you do a good job. They only care about it when it's broken and they want to complain. So because everyone just expects the networks to work, right? They don't, and even though you've done a great job, they don't notice. So yeah.
And do you think you'll go down that path, Tobias, or
not network? Nowhere near networks.
Because I think you want to do cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good field as well to get into, isn't it, David? Especially with new age technology and that sort of thing.
Yeah, look, cybersecurity is a huge issue at the moment, especially with cyber crime and things like foreign states causing all sorts of trouble. At Parliament we even had a thing recently where we've had to we're not allowed to use TikTok on our phones for security reasons. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Were you a big TikTok user at that point, David, or?
No, so I don't use TikTok, but I mainly use Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
I think we'll move on now to our third question. I think that's with you, George.
As a member of the Libertarian Party, freedom of speech is an important part of your party's ideology. What do you think the current state of the Victorian government and freedom of speech threatened under this government?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Like, freedom of speech is a really important part of our party's philosophy, because without freedom of speech, you can't articulate ideas and argue for other freedoms. In Victoria, look, and in Australia in general, I think freedom of speech is under serious threat. The government's putting through some laws. They're talking about these new, they're calling them anti-vilification laws. We're concerned about what sort of thresholds they're going to have for limiting speech. And we're very concerned about the state of free speech in Victoria and Australia in general. And you would have seen recently there was some cases of our federal e-safety commissioner wanting to censor things that the government didn't like in foreign countries, which seems crazy, but that's what they were doing.
And as you said, that's a very big part of your political party, and I think not many people out there do know a lot about the Libertarians as a whole, because a lot of people, especially our viewers out there, would be mainly Liberal or Labor voters, or even Greens to an extent. So I think in general, for our audience out there, Libertarians are very, very much focused on freedom of speech and freedom for all people and civil liberties and that sort of thing, for sure.
Yeah. So our party is a bit unusual in that we're founded on a particular set of principles, on the principles of freedom. So we defend individual rights, free trade, but of course the most important freedom, as I said, is freedom of speech. So, and that's something that we focus a lot on too.
Yeah. And would you say there's any other political party that's similar to the Libertarians in government, or in Australian example, or not really at all? Is it just its own little thing? Or
Yeah, look, I think we're quite unique in that we're like really strictly aligned to a set of principles.
Yeah.
I think a lot of other parties, they're either single issue, like minor parties, they're either single issue, or they're, or with the major parties, they can sort of, float depending
Yeah.
on what public perception is.
Yeah, and I think there's even some people in the Liberal Party that are probably identify as libertarians themselves. So
Yeah, some do. You'd say like the Liberal Party is, has quite a broad membership, and some people in the Liberal Party, you would say, they probably self-identify as a libertarian, but our party is like exclusively libertarian.
just for libertarians, yeah. And any of you two interested in joining the Libertarians? I don't know if you guys have a young libertarian movement.
We
but-
do actually.
Oh,
We
wow.
started it up last year, and I went to their launch event. It was great, and a bunch of 20-something guys and girls, and they've been doing actually some really great stuff. So
Are there any clubs in any of the universities, or is it just like a whole young libertarian movement in general?
there aren't yet, but I think that's something that we're definitely looking at now that we've grown to the size where we could probably do that sort of thing. So I think I'd love to see young libertarians set up on campus and that sort of thing, but at the moment they're not.
Yeah, so maybe down the line, if any of our viewers are out there and are interested in joining young libertarians and joining that sort of movement, if that aligns with your ideology, for sure try and I think you've probably got contact with all the young libertarians out there. So if you are interested, probably just shoot David an email, and you can see where your journey takes you from there. So we'll move on now to our fourth question. So, what are some of your priorities for the upcoming parliamentary year for the people of the southeastern metropolitan region?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest concern for everyone at the moment is inflation and cost of living. These are huge concerns both for families and for businesses. So some of the things that I've been working with constituents on, a big thing recently was land tax. So a lot of businesses, including manufacturers, there's a lot of manufacturers in the southeast, have been hit with big increases in land tax, both because property prices have gone up, but also because the government put a COVID levy on land taxes. And I'm concerned that that's going to result in job losses and companies going offshore. So that's a big concern. Also with housing is a big deal as well. So we've been focusing a lot on stamp duty and red tape in housing construction and planning issues. And I think the government itself is very concerned about these issues too. So we'll see what happens over the next year. But certainly cost of living and housing are big issues, along with other issues like free speech, which is something that's going to come up over the next year or so.
Yep, and I know some of the people in the Liberal Party, for example, are talking a lot about reviewing our stamp duty laws and that sort of thing. Do you think that's something that should be done?
Well, I actually got an inquiry into stamp duty up back in 2019.
Oh, wow.
And last year, sorry.
Not that long ago.
Different inquiry. That was good. It generated a lot of interest, and it highlighted a lot of the problems with stamp duty about labour mobility. Like, it makes it hard for you to take a job in another part of the state. It makes it hard to buy a house. It results in inefficient allocation of housing. So there's lots and lots of problems with stamp duty. I think you talk to any economist, they'll tell you it's the most inefficient tax out there. So look, something needs to be done with stamp duty. Personally, I'd like them to just abolish it and scale back the size of government. But let's look at what sort of options the government actually comes up with.
Yeah, and I think I've talked to a member for the Northern Metropolitan Region, Evan Mulholland, before.
Yeah, I know Evan, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit about this issue, especially in housing. And I think he was telling me that, stamp duty laws, for example, it's been the same sort of like stamp duty tax for about 10, 15 years now, and it hasn't been reviewed. And, house prices of it have considerably increased since the late 2000s, early 2010s. So I think for sure that should be looked at in, maybe in the case it should be abolished, but the actual, at the very least it should be decreased for sure.
Yeah, at the very least they should index it, because as you say, house prices have gone up, but the thresholds at where the various rates come in are based on house prices, but they haven't changed in a very long time. And so it used to be that the sort of low to average house wouldn't attract stamp duty, but now just about every house attracts stamp duty, and it's a big problem for housing affordability.
Yeah, because I think back in those days as well, like I know I can speak for, when my parents bought our house out in the western suburbs, like we paid $300,000, and that was pretty, it wasn't too expensive, but it wasn't, too cheap at that point in time. But nowadays, houses in our area can go up towards $800,000-$900,000. So it's changed considerably, and that sort of stamp duty cost is really, really, it's a really high cost for young people, especially who are trying to buy their first home.
Yeah, and it's also a big cost for people who have retired or their kids have left home, and they might have a large home and they want to downsize, but it's a big cost for them to do that. So a lot of them live in larger houses than what they need because they're worried about paying this big cost. So it really does result in misallocation of housing stock.
Yeah, and if we go back to land tax as well, do you think the whole land tax scheme should be abolished as well, or what are your opinions on that?
Look, I think the way the valuations are done is not very transparent. I think they really need to look at making that a lot more transparent and easier to understand, because a lot of these people that have got increases in land tax, they say, well, I want this reviewed because I don't understand how it's gone up so much, and it's a really big problem. So, I think there definitely needs to be an inquiry into how land tax is calculated. I think the COVID levy on top of the land tax was really unfair, basically making, factory owners pay for what happened in COVID, especially since, many of them suffered during COVID because they were shut down. So,
exactly,
I think it's really unfair.
Yeah, I think we'll move on now to our fifth question. I think we really appreciate you talking about those land tax issues and housing crisis, especially for our viewers out there who I'm considering are very, very young. Those sort of issues are very, very important for us. So we do really appreciate you talking about them in Parliament, especially David. So, but we'll move on now to our fifth question. It's with you, Tobias.
Yeah. Who would you say is your political role model or idol?
Look, I reckon, I was inspired a lot by Ron Paul in the US. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's not a politician anymore, but he certainly had a lot of influence on my thinking on how he communicated messaging and that sort of thing. He's a great guy.
Is there anything specific that you take from Ron Paul that you try to use in your own political career, or is it more just like, his influence in the certain types of ways that you vote on certain bills or the way you do things in Parliament?
Yeah, look, I think what he did that was really good was he's got this great ability to communicate the ideas of liberty and why they're important and why people should care about these sort of things. And I think he did a great job in the United States of communicating that and inspired many people around the world. Yeah.
And I know the Libertarian Party in the US is a lot bigger than it is in Australia, for sure. In a sense, I'd say.
Well, they don't have as many people elected.
That's true.
Because of their political system. Yeah, it's very different there.
Yeah, but I think in general, Libertarians are really the strong third party, that even ahead of the Greens to an extent there, I'd say.
Yeah, in the US, probably.
Yeah.
There's certainly a large libertarian movement in the US. It's quite different to Australia. They have many different focuses, and because of their political system, they don't have preferential voting and this sort of thing. So it makes it very difficult for parties in the US, like minor parties, to actually get elected.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big problem in the US, and
for sure.
I'm glad that Australia doesn't have that sort of crazy system.
Yeah, because it does in a lot of senses as well. In the US, it's all just Democrats or Republicans. So
yeah,
and if you're tired of both major parties, you can't really vote for anyone else in a sense, or else you'd be kind of wasting your vote, as they'd say. So
and that's not the case in Australia. So you can vote for a minor party, safe in the knowledge that your preference will ultimately go through to whoever you want, and your vote won't get wasted, whereas it's quite different in the US.
And I think, are you in contact with many of the libertarians in the US, or is it more just libertarians in Australia, and probably even all across the world as well? Are you in contact with any?
Yeah, look, I've had contact with a few. Last year, Spike Cohen. He was a US Libertarian Party presidential candidate, and he came out to Australia, and I've been in contact with him a lot. He's a really great guy. I've also met with representatives from a micronation called Liberland in Europe, and
I've heard of Liberland.
They're interesting. They're like a tiny piece of land that was unclaimed by different countries, and so they just sort of claimed it. And
is this the one in between Croatia and Serbia?
That's the one.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting, talking to them about some of the problems they've had and what their vision is and this sort of thing. But it's a great sort of experiment that they're doing over there. So yeah, good luck to them.
Yeah. I think we'll move on now to our sixth question for you, David. George.
What made you run the 2018 Victorian state election for the Libertarian Party, and what made you join the Libertarian Party?
Yeah, so I originally, when I started becoming interested in political ideas, I became interested in libertarian philosophy and looked around at different parties in Australia and found that there was a party in Australia that had that philosophy. At the time it was called the Liberal Democrats, and so I started following them around 2007, 2008, and then I joined in 2013 and became sort of active in the party around 2014. I didn't really think that I was going to win in 2018. I was just trying to help out the party and get the message out there. I'd also run in the 2014 state election and the 2016 federal election. And so, I wanted to help out spread the message of, our philosophy and our politics, and, got elected on that platform eventually, and then, the rest is history, I suppose. We've been doing, pushing that as good as we can ever since I got elected.
Yep. And was it just mainly the ideology and, the certain sort of ideas that libertarians push that, drew you to join the Libertarian Party? And did you consider any other political parties as well while you were trying to figure out where you sat in the political spectrum?
Yeah, look, I looked at all political parties, but ultimately I was interested in joining a party that stood really firm on principles, and that's what we do. Some people would say we're too strict on principle, but I think it's a good thing. It keeps us focused, and I think that sort of voice is really useful and even necessary to have in Parliament as a minor party, to say, well, what about people's rights, and what about the impact that you're having on the economy by doing this thing? Because without that, I think it's really easy for governments to, just do things without considering those problems.
Yeah, because I think in general sometimes the government forgets, what these decisions that they make, they do affect real people's lives sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's important that politicians out there remind them that the decisions that they make in Parliament not only affect not only would it affect them in a political sense, but in fact actual people as well. And sometimes that is forgotten in Parliament and in politics, sadly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think we'll move on now to our final question for you, David. I do really appreciate you, as I said before, coming on the podcast. And I think it's the first time we've interviewed a Libertarian MP. Because do you have any other Libertarian MPs across Australia? Or?
Yeah, so we have one in New South Wales, John Ruddock. He got elected last year in the New South Wales Upper House. But no others at the moment. We're hoping that maybe we'll get a senator up in the next federal election. We'll wait and see.
We'll wait and see for sure, yeah. So our final question to you, David, is what's some advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are starting university or high school?
Yeah, look, I think my key advice would be, don't feel like you have to choose exactly what your career is going to be when you finish your education. I think even universities now don't sort of expect you to do that. I think find the field that you're passionate about, that you're good at, that you enjoy, and then go through that. And once you get towards the end of your education, then you can say, all right, well, the job I want to do is actually this. Because if you're lucky at university and at high school, you'll get opportunities to do work experience in different things, and that will help you understand, maybe what you thought was your career path is not exactly what you want to do. You know, I went through that myself. You know, you were talking before about, you know, network engineering, and, you know, maybe you start off in one area of IT and you move into another one. And there's lots of opportunities to do that at university. So I'd say my advice would be, don't get too stuck on a particular job or particular career path. Just choose what you're good at and what you think is you know, something that you're going to enjoy working in, and then worry about it later, I think. Yeah,
because I think for sure, like, a lot of people just get stuck in their certain career path and their certain, you know, job, and in a lot of senses as well, people, you know, change jobs all the time, as you've shown, David. You know, did you think probably 20 years back you'd be in Parliament currently and, you know, being a representative?
I wouldn't. Never even considered that.
Yeah. So I think in general, it's really, really important that, you know, you have an open mindset, and, you know, you take, you know, every opportunity as is, and you know, don't be hung up if you don't get into a specific job, because another opportunity will come down the line. As you know, as you said, David, you know, you didn't get elected in 2014 or 2016, but eventually got elected in 2018. So I guess keep trying and pushing, and, you know, don't focus yourself on one specific industry or one specific job that you want. Try and broaden your ideas and try and broaden your scope for where you want to be in the future.
Sure.
Yeah. Those are all our questions for you, David. I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast again, as I said, and talking to us about, you know, your career before politics and some advice you'd give to students who are currently studying in university or high school.
Thanks for having me on. Great to talk with you.
Thank you, David.